My daughter took my villa and gave it to her husband's family, saying, "Now it's theirs. You're not allowed to come here." I smiled and nodded, hiding my anger. But when they came to move in, I, Agnes Rowe, prepared a surprise for them that they would never forget. They were shocked by what they saw. Betrayal turned into revenge, where justice struck from an unexpected direction, changing everything forever. I, Agnes Rowe, slammed the car door and grabbed my weekend bag, already picturing the quiet hours ahead by the lake. 3 days of peace at my villa, exactly what I needed after another exhausting week of managing the San Diego properties. The 2-hour drive from the city had been worth it just to see Lake Tahoe's crystal waters again. But something was wrong. 2 figures in white bathrobes stood on my private terrace, coffee mugs steaming in their hands. My daughter, Kelly, leaned against the railing, her dark hair catching the afternoon sun. Behind her, a man I recognized as her husband Palmer shifted uncomfortably when he spotted me. "What the hell?" I muttered, my bag slipping from my suddenly numb fingers. Kelly straightened, her face hardening into an expression I'd never seen before. Not even during her worst teenage years had she looked at me with such cold dismissal. "Mom, you can't stay here," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Palmer and I are planning a romantic weekend." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. This was my villa. The deed had my name on it, bought with money I had earned managing decades of work in San Diego. My late husband and I had picked out every tile, every fixture, every piece of furniture. "But Kelly, this is my villa," I started, my voice trailing off as the absurdity of having to state this obvious fact hit me. "I don't care," she set her mug down with a sharp clink. "We were here first, and we're not leaving." Palmer mumbled something I couldn't catch, but Kelly waved him off. Her bathrobe fell open slightly, and she pulled it tighter with an angry jerk. "Honey, I drove 2 hours," I said, taking a tentative step toward the front door. "I just wanted to spend the weekend. Get out of here and don't bother us." Kelly's voice rose to a shout. "You're just in the way anyway." The words hit me like a physical blow. In the way. This was my property, my retreat, the place where my late husband and I had planned to grow old together, where I came to feel close to his memory. I stood there, my bag at my feet, staring at my only child as she glared at me from the terrace of my own home. Palmer looked everywhere except at me, his face flushed red above his bathrobe collar. 28 years old, and Kelly was ordering me off my own property like I was some unwanted stranger. The same girl who used to curl up in my lap for bedtime stories, who had called me mommy until she turned 16, who had sobbed in my arms at her father's funeral. My husband's voice whispered in my memory, "Be patient with her, Agnes. She's still processing the grief. Give her time, 3 years." I had given her 3 years of patience, of understanding, of bending over backward to accommodate her moods and demands. And this was what it had gotten me. "Fine," I heard myself say, the word tasting like ash. "Fine, I'll go." I bent to pick up my bag, my knees creaking with the motion. 70 years old, and my own daughter was treating me like dirt on her shoes. "Good," Kelly called out. "Next time, call first." "Next time, call first to use my own property." I walked back to my car on unsteady legs, each step feeling like a retreat from some battlefield I hadn't even known I was supposed to fight on. Behind me, I heard Kelly's voice, softer now, talking to Palmer about their plans for dinner. The engine turned over with a smooth purr. German engineering, reliable as always, unlike family, apparently. I backed out of the driveway, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of Kelly and Palmer settling back into their chairs on the terrace, already dismissing my existence. My daughter raised her coffee mug in what might have been a toast, or might have been a final goodbye. The road back to San Diego stretched ahead, empty and long. I would be driving home in defeat, tail between my legs, just like my late husband always worried I would, just like I always did. Monday evening found me in my study, nursing lukewarm coffee and the remnants of a solitary dinner. 3 days had crawled by since Friday's humiliation at the villa. Saturday, I jumped every time the phone rang, expecting Kelly to call with some explanation. Sunday brought the uncomfortable realization that maybe I was always too quick to surrender. The phone's shrill ring cut through my thoughts. Mom. Kelly's voice carried none of the warmth I had desperately hoped for. Cold, businesslike. Listen carefully. Palmer and I have decided the villa now belongs to his parents. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. What? Kelly? What are you talking about? Carl and Margaret Thompson. It's their home now. Her words dropped like stones into still water. You're forbidden from going there anymore. The leather chair creaked as I sat forward. Kelly, have you lost your mind? You can't just take my property. Actually, I can, and I am. Her voice sharpened to a blade's edge. You hardly use it anyway, and they desperately need proper housing. 30 years of 12-hour days managing properties and scraping through endless struggles flashed through my mind. Every permit fight, every difficult client, every sacrifice my late husband and I had made to afford that dream home by the lake. It's my villa. The words exploded out of me with surprising force. I worked 3 decades to buy that place. Kelly's laugh held no humor. You're being ridiculously selfish. After everything we've done for you since Dad died. Something snapped. Everything you've done for me? My voice rose to match hers. I paid for your wedding, your car, your college loans, that fancy apartment deposit. That's what children do for their mothers, she cut me off. Besides, you're old and alone now. What do you possibly need with such a big villa? Old and alone. The phrase hit like a physical blow, but instead of crumpling, I felt something harden inside my chest. My late husband's gentle voice once whispered from memory about patience, but he had never heard our daughter speak with such calculated cruelty. Those are Palmer's parents, Kelly. Complete strangers to me. They're family now, and unlike you, they'll actually appreciate what they're getting. My grip tightened on the phone until my knuckles went white. Number. Silence stretched between us. I could practically hear her surprise crackling through the connection. What did you just say? I said, No, Kelly. The answer is no. You can't say no to me. That villa is wasted on you anyway. Her composure finally cracked, revealing something ugly underneath. Palmer's parents have been struggling financially, and you're just hoarding property you barely visit. The irony burned. I had been visiting more frequently since my husband's death, seeking comfort in the place where we had been happiest. Kelly knew this perfectly well. They can find their own housing solutions, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. I can't believe how selfish you've become. Kelly's voice climbed toward hysteria. Dad would be ashamed of you. That crossed every line. My late husband would never have supported this theft. This manipulation of a grieving mother's love for her only child. Your father would be horrified by what you've become, I said quietly. Kelly's intake of breath was audible. How dare you? I hung up. For the first time in 3 years, I had hung up on my daughter. The phone sat silent in my lap as my heart hammered against my ribs. Outside, San Diego's evening traffic hummed its familiar rhythm, but inside my study, everything had changed. The phone rang again immediately. Kelly's name flashed on the display. I turned it off. Sleep remained elusive that night. I sat in my leather chair until well past midnight, replaying every word of Kelly's outrageous demand. The silence in my study felt different now, not peaceful, but charged with possibility. By morning, something fundamental had shifted inside me. Tuesday brought clarity with the sunrise. I made coffee, retrieved my laptop, and began researching property law with the same methodical precision that had carried me through decades of work and survival. California statutes, transfer requirements, documentation needs, information I had learned decades ago, but never imagined needing against my own daughter. The phone buzzed with text messages throughout the day. Kelly, of course. Mom, we need to talk about yesterday. Then, don't be stubborn about this. Finally, Palmer's parents are coming to see the villa this weekend. I deleted each message without responding. Wednesday morning, I drove to my attorney's office downtown. Marcus Chen had handled my business transactions for 15 years, a sharp mind wrapped in diplomatic courtesy. His corner office overlooked the harbor, floor-to-ceiling windows framing sailboats that danced across the bay. Agnes. Marcus rose from behind his mahogany desk, extending a firm handshake. Good to see you. How can I help? I settled into the familiar client chair, the leather still creaking in exactly the same spot as always. I need to discuss property protection strategies. Marcus raised an eyebrow, but remained professionally neutral. Commercial or residential? Residential? The Lake Tahoe Villa. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Someone is attempting to claim ownership rights they don't possess. Family member? The question hit like a diagnosis I wasn't ready to hear. Yes. Marcus nodded slowly, his expression growing more serious. That complicates things. Family disputes over property can get messy quickly. What are my options? Several. Marcus pulled out a legal pad, his pen already moving. First, we ensure your ownership documentation is ironclad. Second, we can establish additional protective measures, trusts, LLC structures, whatever makes sense for your situation. How quickly? Depends on complexity. Basic documentation review. A few days, more sophisticated protection. 2 to 3 weeks. I thought about Kelly's text message. Palmer's parents coming this weekend. I may not have that long. Marcus set down his pen, studying my face with the intensity that made him excellent at reading clients and juries alike. Agnes, is someone trying to force you off your own property? The question hung between us like an accusation. When I nodded, Marcus's professional demeanor hardened into something more personal. Then we start immediately. I'll need copies of all deeds, transfer documents, anything related to the property's ownership history. I can have everything to you by tomorrow morning. Good. Marcus made another note. And Agnes, document everything. Conversations, threats, attempts at coercion. Contemporary records matter in these situations. Threats, coercion, the legal terms for what my daughter had tried to do to me. The elevator descended toward the parking garage, each floor marking my distance from the life I had known just days ago. At the lobby level, my reflection caught in the polished steel doors. A woman who looked older than her 70 years, but with something new in her eyes. Determination. I, Agnes Rowe, was no longer the shadow they thought I was. My phone rang as I reached the car. Kelly again. This time I answered. Finally. Her voice carried the sharp edge of someone accustomed to getting her way. We need to resolve this childish nonsense. The only nonsense, I said calmly, is your belief that you can steal my property. Steal? How dare you use that word with me? What would you call taking someone's home without permission? Kelly's pause lasted longer than usual. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted to something more calculated. Mom, Palmer's parents really are struggling financially. Margaret lost her job last month, and Carl's pension barely covers their rent. A manipulation technique I recognized from her teenage years, appeal to sympathy when demands failed. That's unfortunate, but it doesn't give them rights to my villa. You could be generous. Show some family spirit, like the family spirit you showed me Friday at the villa. Another pause. That was, we were surprised to see you there at my own property. You should have called first. The circular logic was dizzying. Kelly, I'm not giving anyone my villa. That's final. Fine. Her voice cracked like a whip. But Palmer's parents are still coming to look at it this Saturday. They've already made travel arrangements. The line went dead. I stood beside my car, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. Above me, San Diego's afternoon sky stretched endless and blue, the same sky that had watched me build everything I owned through decades of honest work. Saturday was 4 days away. The dial tone droned in my ear as I stood frozen beside my car. Kelly's words echoed mercilessly. Palmer's parents would come see the villa this Saturday, as if it already belonged to them. Slowly, I lowered the phone. setting it down on the seat next to my forgotten coffee cup. The liquid inside had long gone cold, a thin film skimming its surface. Outside, San Diego's evening traffic pulsed with its usual rhythm, but inside my study, the air was different now. It wasn't peace anymore. It was tension waiting to break. How long had this been going on? When had I stopped being Kelly's mother and become nothing more than her open wallet? The memories rushed back with brutal clarity. Her wedding 2 years ago, when she called it just a little help with expenses. Yet I wrote a check for $15,000 without question. The SUV Palmer insisted they needed 8 months later, $25,000 gone in a blink. Elizabeth's absence had left me vulnerable, and I'd confused exploitation with love. Kelly's wedding, Palmer's new car, her endless tuition bills, each request had chipped away at me, and each time I gave in. At first I told myself it was grief, that she just needed time, but 3 years had passed, and her need had turned into entitlement. I had trained my own daughter to see me not as a mother, but as a bank, and now she thought she could take the villa too. I had paid nearly $40,000 for her graduate school, covering every bill without hesitation, even when she changed majors twice and stretched her program longer than planned. Her thank you calls grew shorter, then stopped altogether, except when she needed something more. The pattern was undeniable, every request bigger, every ounce of gratitude smaller. I had mistaken surrender for love, and she had learned to exploit it. The walls of my study displayed decades of achievements, framed certificates, photographs, contracts that told the story of a woman who had built everything through grit and calculation. Yet in my personal life, I had allowed myself to be reduced to a doormat. On my desk sat a silver frame with my husband's photo, taken on our last trip to the villa. His smile, the sunlight in his hair, he would never have tolerated this level of disrespect. For 3 years, I had said yes to every demand, terrified that a single no would drive her away, the last family I had left. But family doesn't steal. Family doesn't twist grief into opportunity. Kelly had mistaken my silence for weakness, and I had let her. That night, staring at my husband's photograph, I asked aloud, "What would you want me to do?" The answer came in my own voice, steady and sharp. "Stop being a victim." Sleep never came. I went through my nightly rituals, shower, brushing my teeth, flipping through the Sunday paper. But when I lay in bed, my mind refused to rest. Instead of counting sheep, I counted days. Monday, April 28th. Tuesday, the 29th. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, May 4th. By midnight, I gave up on sleep altogether, lying flat on my back, hands clasped, staring at the ceiling. My daughter had given me a deadline, and after 70 years of bending, I was finally preparing to bend no more. Kelly had made a crucial mistake. She gave me a timeline. In all my years of managing projects, I'd learned one truth. Whoever revealed their deadline first usually lost. Sunday, May 4th. That meant she was working backward from some fixed constraint, likely Palmer's parents' lease ending or their moving schedule. The digital clock glowed 12:47 a.m. as the framework of my response began to form. This was no longer about emotions. This was about strategy, and strategy was something I, Agnes Rowe, understood all too well. This wasn't about heartache anymore. It was about leverage. Every hard client, every unfair deadline, every battle I had fought over contracts had trained me for this moment. Rule 1, never negotiate from desperation. Kelly thought I was desperate to preserve our relationship, not anymore. Rule 2, information is power. She believed she knew me inside out, the grieving widow too weak to resist. She had no idea about my meeting with Marcus Chen. Rule 3, timing is everything. 6 days felt rushed to her, but for me, it was enough to prepare something devastatingly precise. I remembered battles from years past, ruthless developers who tried to corner me, contractors who thought they could cheat me, deadlines designed to break me. I had let them believe they were winning, all while setting the trap that would undo them. Kelly thought she was pressuring me into surrender. In truth, she had given me the one thing I needed most: time. This time, my daughter was about to learn what it meant to mistake patience for weakness. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Kelly. "Mom, Palmer's parents found a moving company for Sunday. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." The audacity almost made me laugh. She was already arranging movers for a property that wasn't hers. I had seen this tactic before. Act as if the deal is already done, force the other side into submission. But I wasn't the same woman she thought I was. Not anymore. I set the phone aside and let my mind work the problem the way I once did with contracts. Resources, timeline, risks, outcomes. I still had savings, legal counsel, decades of hard-won experience, and one crucial advantage Kelly didn't know about: allies who owed me favors. 6 days was more than enough. This time, my daughter would face not the mother she thought she could bully, but Agnes Rowe, the strategist she had never met. I listed my resources like weapons on a battlefield: financial reserves, my attorney's guidance, 30 years of hard lessons, and one neighbor with technical expertise who owed me more than a small favor. Timeline: 6 days. Objective: not just to stop Kelly's scheme, but to make her understand the cost of betrayal. Risks: minimal compared to the price of silence. As the plan formed, I felt something I hadn't in years: a quiet, ruthless confidence. My husband once told me there was a part of me people rarely saw: 95% kindness, 5% terrifying when pushed too far. Kelly had never witnessed that side of me, but she was about to. By 2 a.m, the framework was clear. Tomorrow, I would seek help from my neighbor for the technical pieces. Then, finalize details with Marcus. Preparation would fill the rest of the week. On Sunday, Kelly would meet a version of her mother she could neither predict nor control. Tuesday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I woke at 7, full of energy, as if the weight I had carried for so long had finally shifted. After coffee and a shower, I walked across the street to Derek's house. He answered the door in his usual worn jeans and startup t-shirt, eyes still glazed from hours of staring at code. "Agnes, everything okay?" he asked. I stepped into his office, screens glowing with lines of text, and smiled faintly. "Actually, I need your help with a little project." Derek's eyebrows lifted with sudden curiosity. "What kind of project? You've definitely got my attention." "Home automation," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "Something with motion sensors, lights, maybe even sound." A little surprise for some uninvited guests. His chair swiveled toward me, eyes lighting up. "Oh, this sounds fascinating. Like a haunted house setup?" "Close enough," I said, a thin smile crossing my face. "Exactly the kind of impression I want to leave." Derek's grin widened. "Then let's get started. This is going to be fun." Within 2 hours, we had loaded his SUV with gadgets: motion detectors, programmable lights, wireless speakers, even a tablet loaded with control software. As we drove toward Lake Tahoe, Derek's excitement filled the car. He explained cascading triggers, lights setting off sounds, sounds activating water systems, each detail weaving the house into a living trap. I, Agnes Rowe, listened carefully, memorizing every word. My daughter thought she knew me. She had no idea. By the time we reached the villa, Derek was brimming with ideas. He walked through each room, mapping out sensor placement, identifying the best angles for cameras, and programming the tablet with careful precision. The moment someone steps inside, lights will flash. A voice will warn them they don't belong here. If they ignore it, the system escalates: water, sound, shadows. His eyes gleamed with mischief, but I only nodded. For me, this wasn't play. This was war. Derek moved with the speed of someone in his element. Within minutes, sensors were mounted, wires hidden neatly, and the first sequences tested. "Step into the entryway," he told me. I obeyed, and immediately the lights strobed, the programmed voice echoing through the villa. "You are not the owners of this house. Leave immediately." I stood still, listening to the rush of water as faucets burst open in the kitchen. Derek laughed, pleased with the chaos. I, Agnes Rowe, didn't laugh. I only thought, good, let them taste fear. Derek shut down the sequence, his grin wide with pride. The beauty of this system is that it runs even if they cut the power. Battery backup, remote access, you'll control everything from your phone. He showed me the interface, live feeds, overrides, escalation settings. To him, it was a brilliant experiment. To me, it was justice wearing wires and circuits. I, Agnes Rowe, would finally have a voice they could not talk over, a boundary they could not cross. We spent the afternoon walking through every room, testing sequences, adjusting sensors until the entire villa responded like a living creature. Lights pulsed in patterns designed to disorient, voices grew louder with each movement, water systems roared to life on command. Derek's eyes sparkled with delight at the spectacle. I simply watched, memorizing the storm we had built. Soon it wouldn't be a rehearsal. Soon Kelly would learn whose house this truly was. Derek suggested one final test. "Walk into the living room," he said, tablet in hand. I stepped forward. Instantly, the villa came alive, lights strobing, shadows flickering across the walls, water bursting from faucets, the programmed voice thundering, "This property belongs to Agnes Rowe. You are trespassing. Leave now." Derek laughed, exhilarated by the chaos. I stood in the center of it all, letting the noise wash over me. For the first time in years, I felt power return to my hands. The system escalated as Derek had programmed. After 30 seconds of motion, every light in the villa strobed violently while the voice shifted to a harsher warning. "Security system activated. Authorities have been notified. Vacate immediately." Water thundered through pipes, filling sinks and showers. Derek clapped like a boy at a carnival. I didn't smile. Watching the chaos, I thought only of Kelly and Palmer. Let them come. Let them hear this voice instead of mine. Derek shut down the test and pointed to the control screen. "The system has battery backup, so even if they cut the main power, it will keep running. Everything is tied to your phone. You can monitor cameras, adjust settings, or trigger overrides." I studied the tablet, the live feeds glowing across its screen. For Derek, this was clever engineering. For me, it was something more. It was the weapon I had been denied all my life: control. As we packed up the tools, Derek's curiosity finally broke through. "So, when exactly are these unexpected guests arriving?" "Sunday morning," I replied. "And they really don't know what's waiting for them?" he asked, half laughing. I thought of Kelly's smug text about movers and smiled thinly. Let's just say they believe they'll be very comfortable here. Derek's laughter echoed through the villa, but I only stood still, picturing the fear that would soon take its place. The next morning, Derek appeared at my door with his arms full of equipment I hadn't seen before. His eyes gleamed with the restless energy of someone who had spent the night dreaming up new ideas. "I thought of improvements," he said, lifting a compact projector and a bundle of cables. "If they try to cut the main power, we'll have hidden batteries ready. And I've brought projectors for shadow effects, moving figures across the walls." He was nearly giddy. I, Agnes Rowe, watched him carefully. For him, it was invention. For me, it was the architecture of fear. Derek worked with feverish excitement, setting up projectors in the main rooms. Shadows began to crawl across the walls, shifting shapes that tricked the eye into believing someone was there. Even in daylight, the effect was unsettling. Meanwhile, he placed small speakers in hidden corners, layering whispers, footsteps, and creaking sounds into the air. The villa was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a stage. Derek grinned at his masterpiece. I, Agnes Rowe, remained silent. For him, it was entertainment. For me, it was Judgment Day in the making. Derek adjusted the settings, his voice animated. The beauty of this design is psychological. The brain looks for patterns in chaos. These shadows and whispers will make them believe they're seeing things that aren't there. He looked at me, clearly delighted with his craft. I nodded slowly. He saw an experiment in perception. I, Agnes Rowe, saw a mirror, because for years I too had been made to doubt what I knew was real. Now, it was their turn. Derek walked me through the final tests. Hidden speakers released footsteps pacing empty hallways, whispers curling from unseen corners, wind sighing through windows that never opened. At times, the sounds overlapped, building a dissonant chorus that even unsettled me, though I knew it was false. Derek's eyes sparkled. They'll never know what's real and what's not. I, Agnes Rowe, listened in silence. Let them feel the madness of confusion. I had lived in it long enough. By noon, the villa was transformed. Derek installed the backup battery system, cleverly hidden beneath the main panel, ensuring the house could not be silenced. He explained every detail with the pride of an inventor, but I barely responded. For him, it was innovation. For me, it was armor. The villa, once my sanctuary of grief, now stood as a fortress. I, Agnes Rowe, finally had a place no one could take from me, not without facing the storm inside these walls. As we paused for lunch, Derek suggested a finishing touch. What about a warning sign? Something to set the tone before they even walk in. His eyes lit up. Welcome to the house of the future. Enter at your own risk. It'll sound like a tech demo, but they'll know they were warned. I agreed. The message would be clear. They could never say they hadn't been told. The afternoon was devoted to testing everything as one seamless system. Derek walked through each room while I monitored the tablet. Motion in the entryway triggered lights, shadows, and the first warning voice. The villa erupted into controlled chaos, strobing lights, ghostly figures projected on the walls, whispers curling through the air, water bursting from faucets. Derek beamed with satisfaction. Derek explained that once armed, the system would run continuously, escalating with every movement detected. They won't last 10 minutes in here, he said with a grin. I studied the tablet in my hands, the live feeds, the controls, the overrides. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the balance tip back in my favor. The villa was ready, and so was I. As the sun dipped behind the pines, Derek packed away his tools. We walked through the villa one last time, every sensor armed, every light and speaker in place. At the door, he clapped me on the shoulder. They won't know what hit them, Agnes. I gave a faint smile. For Derek, it was clever engineering. For me, it was justice, waiting in silence. Driving back to San Diego, the villa receded in my rearview mirror, dark and silent beneath the mountain sky. But I knew better. It was awake now, waiting. My hands rested steady on the wheel, steadier than they had been in years. Kelly thought she had cornered me. In truth, I had set the stage. Saturday would not be her triumph. It would be her lesson. Back in San Diego, I spread the property files across my desk. Deeds, permits, every receipt and record from the day the villa was built. Marcus had been right. Documentation was power. I marked pages with colored tabs, each one a shield against Kelly's claims. For years, I had saved these papers without thinking. Now, they were no longer memories of the past. They were weapons. Night settled heavy around the house. I sat alone in my study, the folders stacked neatly in front of me, each page a testament to the years I had built and protected what was mine. My hands trembled as I touched them, but my eyes stayed sharp. For decades, I had been the provider, the caretaker, the quiet presence in the background. Now, I was something else. Agnes Rowe, defender of what no one would take from me again. My phone buzzed on the desk, another message from Kelly. Mom, we need to finalize things before the weekend. A second followed minutes later. Please don't make this difficult. I didn't answer. Instead, I pressed my palm flat against the stack of documents, feeling the solidity beneath my hand. For once, I wasn't the one trembling. The papers were steady, and so was I. Following Marcus's advice, I opened a fresh notebook and began to write. Every call, every message, every word Kelly had thrown at me, I documented it all, line by line. Dates, times, exact phrases. The pen moved steadily, turning her cruelty into evidence. When I closed the notebook, I felt lighter. For years I had carried her disrespect in silence. Now the silence had a record. Kelly's words echoed again, old and alone. For a moment they stung, sharp as glass. But instead of breaking me, they hardened into resolve. I was old, yes, but not powerless. I was alone, but not defenseless. I wrote those words in the margin of my notebook, circled them twice. They would remind me why this battle mattered. Every insult was fuel, every dismissal a weapon turned back on her. I stacked the documents into neat piles, each folder labeled, each receipt clipped to its place. The order comforted me, proof that chaos could be mastered. For years I had let Kelly dictate the terms, but here, in this room, the rules were mine. I slid the notebook on top of the stack and closed the desk drawer. Everything was ready. Now, all that remained was to wait. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Kelly lit the screen. "Mom, please stop being so difficult. Palmer's parents are counting on this." I stared at the words, then set the phone face down on the desk. Her urgency was showing now, cracks forming in her confidence. I didn't reply. Silence, I had learned, was sometimes the loudest answer. Marcus called that evening, his tone brisk but steady. "Agnes, have you gathered everything we discussed?" I opened the drawer, my hand resting on the stack of documents and the notebook on top. "Yes, it's all here, organized and ready." There was a pause on the line, then his voice softened. "Good. Then you're in control now. Don't let them rattle you." I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing evenly. For the first time, I truly believed him. After the call, I sat in the quiet of my study, the hum of the city faint through the windows. For years, I had confused endurance with weakness, silence with surrender. Now I understood. They could also be strength, if wielded with intent. My heartbeat slowed, steady and calm. Kelly thought I would break. Instead, I was sharpening. That night, I let my mind wander to Saturday. I pictured Kelly and Palmer stepping through the front door, smug and certain, already imagining the villa as theirs. I saw the lights flare, the shadows crawl, the voice thunder its warning. I imagined their bravado dissolving into fear. For once, I didn't chase the thought away. I welcomed it. Justice sometimes wears strange clothing, and this time, it wore circuits and wires. By Thursday, I decided to return to the villa for one final inspection. The drive felt different this time. Not a retreat, but an approach. Every turn of the road brought me closer, not just to the house, but to the reckoning ahead. When the villa came into view, standing quiet against the lake, I no longer saw a place of loss. I saw a stage, set and waiting. Inside, the villa greeted me with silence. I walked slowly through each room, checking sensors, adjusting timers, running one last sequence. Lights flared, voices echoed, shadows stretched across the walls, just as Derek had designed. The house was ready, alive in its own strange way. I stood in the center of the living room, listening to the artificial chaos fade back into quiet. Soon, it would not be rehearsal. Soon, it would be justice. I walked back to the front door and checked the locks twice. The villa stood behind me, quiet as stone, yet humming with hidden life. In the driveway, I paused, glancing up at the windows. To anyone else, it was just glass reflecting the lake. To me, it was eyes, watching, waiting. I slid into my car and started the engine. The trap was set. The drive back to San Diego felt strangely calm. The roads I had once traveled in defeat now carried me with purpose. In the rearview mirror, the mountains faded into dusk, but I didn't feel lost this time. I felt readiness. By the time I reached the city lights, my plan was no longer a collection of ideas. It was reality, ticking toward Saturday. Back home in San Diego, I unlocked my front door and stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of coffee and paper, the ordinary sense of my life. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. I set my bag down in the hallway, then went straight to my study. The files waited, stacked neatly on the desk. I touched the top folder, and for the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like the hunter. The days that followed moved with deliberate pace. Each morning I rose early, reviewed the documents, and rehearsed what I might say if pressed. I walked the perimeter of my small garden in the evenings, steadying my breath, training myself to remain calm. Every hour was preparation, every detail sharpened like a blade. Saturday was no longer something to dread. It was the day I would reclaim what was mine. Saturday morning dawned crisp and cold. I dressed carefully, choosing my dark wool coat, the one that always made me feel composed, almost judicial. In the mirror, an old woman looked back at me, but her eyes were steady, unyielding. I gathered the files into my leather bag, slid the notebook on top, and locked the front door behind me. Today would not be about sentiment. Today was about truth. The road to Lake Tahoe stretched before me, winding through pines and shadows. My hands rested steady on the wheel, the leather bag beside me like silent armor. With every mile, I felt less like a mother going to see her child, and more like a general moving toward the battlefield. By the time the villa came into view, the fear was gone. All that remained was resolve. As I turned into the driveway, two unfamiliar cars were already parked outside the villa, Kelly's sedan and Palmer's parents' SUV. My chest tightened, but my grip on the wheel never faltered. They had come early, bold as thieves walking into daylight. I parked slowly, stepped out, and felt the mountain air cut sharp against my face. The stage was set. Kelly stood on the front steps beside Palmer, her arms folded, chin lifted as if she already owned the place. Palmer's parents lingered behind them, awkward in their Sunday best, pretending not to notice me. Kelly's smile was thin, rehearsed. "Mom, you made it. I was starting to think you wouldn't show." I met her gaze without flinching. "Of course I came. This is my home." Kelly's smile sharpened. "Not anymore. We've already explained this, Mom. The villa belongs to Palmer's parents now. You shouldn't make a scene." Her words were smooth, but her eyes flickered with unease. I placed my leather bag on the step, the files inside heavy with truth. "Kelly," I said evenly, "this villa carries my name on every document. You may wish it otherwise, but wishes don't change the law." Palmer stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "Mrs. Rowe, please don't make this harder. We're family now. Sharing the villa is the right thing to do." His parents nodded quickly, grateful for his words. I met his gaze, my tone calm, almost gentle. Family doesn't take what isn't theirs. Family doesn't turn a mother into a stranger at her own door. The silence that followed cut sharper than any shout. Kelly's voice rose, sharp enough to pierce the mountain air. "Mom, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself. Everyone knows the villa will be better off with Palmer's parents. You hardly even use it." Her confidence rang false, like a stage actress overselling her lines. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I opened my bag and laid the first folder on the step, then let the papers speak. "They don't lie, Kelly." Palmer's parents shifted uncomfortably, their earlier confidence slipping. Kelly crossed her arms tighter, her eyes darting toward the folder I had placed down. I opened it slowly, revealing deeds, permits, tax records, each page stamped with my name. This villa was built with my money, my labor, and my years. Every document proves it. I looked at each of them in turn. "So tell me, which of you plans to erase me with words when the law has already written the truth?" Kelly snapped, her voice shaking with rage. "What did those papers mean? This house was supposed to be ours. That's what Dad wanted." The words came rushing out, urgent and desperate. I picked up another file and placed it gently on top of the first. "Your father wanted this villa to be your refuge, Kelly. He told you so. These papers respect that wish. Your anger does not." Palmer raised his hands, his tone cautious. Let's all calm down. We don't want this to turn ugly. Maybe there's a compromise. No, I interrupted, my voice quiet but cutting through his words. Compromise is what brought us here. Years of giving, years of silence. Not anymore. I set the third folder down, its weight echoing louder than any argument. This villa is not a bargaining chip. It is mine, and it will remain mine. The air grew heavy. Palmer's parents exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier confidence crumbling into doubt. Kelly's lips pressed into a hard line, but I could see the flicker of fear behind her defiance. I spread the last folder open, pages fanning across the steps like a verdict. These are the records of every payment, every permit, every tax made in my name. The law is not on your side, Kelly, nor is justice. Kelly's composure cracked. This isn't fair. You're twisting everything. You always made me feel small, and now you're doing it again in front of everyone. Her words tumbled out, shrill and desperate. I didn't answer. Instead, I gathered the folders into a single stack and closed them with a deliberate snap. The sound echoed in the air, final and undeniable. Sometimes silence is heavier than shouting, and Kelly felt its weight. Palmer's parents fidgeted, their eyes on the ground. His mother spoke first, her voice hesitant. Maybe this is a mistake. We don't want trouble, Agnes. This is your home. Her husband nodded immediately, his relief palpable. I nodded slightly. Yes, it's always been that way. Kelly stiffened beside her, anger and shock writhing across her face. Kelly spun toward Palmer, desperation breaking through her fury. Don't just stand there. Say something. Tell them this house is ours. Palmer's face flushed, his hands twitching at his sides. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence stretched, louder than any defense he could have offered. I remained still, watching. Some battles don't need to be fought. They collapse under their own weight. Kelly's voice cracked as she screamed, her composure shattering completely. This isn't over. You can't just push me aside like this. Her words rang hollow, desperation drowning the fury. I lifted the final folder from my bag, holding it in both hands before placing it down firmly. It is over, Kelly. The law, the documents, and the truth are all here. What you tried to take was never yours. The stillness that followed was absolute. Palmer's parents exchanged a final glance, then turned away. Without a word, they walked back to their SUV, the gravel crunching beneath their steps. Palmer followed slowly, his shoulders heavy with defeat, leaving Kelly standing alone on the steps. I remained where I was, steady as stone, my eyes fixed on her. For the first time, she had no audience to shield her, no allies to echo her lies. It was just mother and daughter, and the truth between us. Kelly's defiance cracked at last, her eyes brimming with tears. Mom, please. You can't do this to me. I'm your daughter. Her voice trembled, softer now, almost childlike. I stepped closer, my tone calm but unyielding. And I was your mother when I gave you everything, your education, your wedding, your home. But love is not a license to steal. Respect is the only inheritance I ever asked for. Kelly sank onto the steps, sobs breaking through her last defenses. I just thought. The words dissolved into tears. I looked down at her, my voice quiet but firm. You thought wrong. Love doesn't excuse betrayal, Kelly. And you will remember this day every time you pass by this house. I turned, gathering my bag, and walked inside. Behind me, her crying echoed against the stone walls, but it no longer held me. Inside the villa, I set my bag on the table and moved to the window. Outside, Kelly's figure was still hunched on the steps, but I no longer felt the pull of her tears. The lake shimmered beyond the glass, steady, eternal. For years I had lived as though sacrifice was the only proof of love. But now I understood. Love without respect becomes chains. I, Agnes Rowe, had broken mine. I lowered myself into the armchair in the living room, the same seat where I had once read bedtime stories to Kelly. The house was quiet now, but not empty. It was mine again, claimed not with anger, but with truth. My hands rested on the armrests, steady at last. Money can be taken, property can be stolen, but respect, once lost, is the hardest thing to win back. That was the lesson my daughter would carry long after today.